Hi, this is Ronald Johnson, your life coach, mentor coach. And what I do is I help people that are tired of who they are and where they are in life.
And this is Gloria, your life coach. I help those who are feeling stuck, struggling with difficulties such as self doubt, inner judgment, lack of confidence, life transitions, and taking steps forward.
And welcome to Life's a Shuffle podcast. Now, you may wonder why it's called Life's a Shuffle. And the reason why we came up with this title is that life is really shuffling. It doesn't matter where you come from, your background, what age you are, you're shuffling multiple things in life. And the best thing to know in life is everybody faces your struggles and everybody faces what you're going through. But there's hope in learning something about that. So when our guests share their journey, the hope is you learn something in that journey so yourself can navigate the struggles you face, the low self-esteem, the self-confidence, and that's why we call podcast Life's a Shuffle.
And throughout this podcast, we share our personal overcoming stories, as well as our guests who shares their personal journey in overcoming their personal struggles. Life's a Shuffle podcast is here to connect like-minded individuals.
And thank you for listening to Life's a Shuffle podcast.
Hi, this is Gloria, mindfulness coach. Welcome to another episode of Life's a Shuffle.
This is Ron Johnson, your mindfulness coach and life coach, and welcome to another episode of Life's a Shuffle. And we have a special guest. And what I like about this special guest, it's around the world. The world is huge, and everybody out there is connected. It doesn't matter if you're from Antarctica and you're from North America. You are connected in some way, some form, some fashion, and all of us contribute to the overall, I would call it the collective, our society, to make things better. So we have a special guest all the way from the Philippines, Frida Soerensen. Thank you and welcome to Life's a Shuffle podcast.
Woo, my home country. Welcome, Frida.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ron and Gloria. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Frida, tell us about yourself, what you do, who you are. I'm so excited we finally have someone from my home country. Um, so yes, please share.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gloria. Yes, I'm also super excited to be interviewed by someone from the Philippines. We have a really great connection in our love for mindfulness and meditation, and pride in our country and where we're coming from. So, yeah, thank you so much for hearing my story. As Ron mentioned, I'm currently based in the Philippines. I say currently because I've lived in a lot of different countries over my life. I was actually born in Denmark to a Danish father and a Filipina mother. Very early on, I was just a baby. My parents decided to move back to the Philippines. My mother really wanted to raise her family within her culture, with her family being around, and her family rooted in her heritage. So I lived here for 13 years. I went through school here. I was raised by a lot of family members. And I also, even with my father being so far away from home, he actually was able to also still instill his language and his values onto us. I have a younger brother as well. So going to the local school here in our village is called Davila, Pasokin Ilocos Norte. We're at the very top of Luzon, which is the biggest island, the main island of the Philippines. We're about 500 kilometers from Manila, so it's very rural. And 30 years ago, it was even more rural. 30 plus years ago, it was more rural. So I went to the local school in Davila, and just grew up amongst locals. And on the weekends, my father would homeschool us in the Danish curriculum. Yeah.
Mm.
So I was reflecting on this just a couple of days ago in my journaling, and I'm like, hang on, I don't remember a lot of summer holidays, and that's because and weekends for that matter. So I was homeschooled on the weekend, and then a lot of the summers of my childhood, we would actually go back to Denmark, and I would slot right into the Danish curriculum, and I would just continue on, I'd have summer holidays here, we'd go over there, and I'd just slot right back into the Danish curriculum or the Danish school system. And then I'd come back to the Philippines when the school year started here and go back to school, so it was a lot of there was a lot of schooling. But it taught me a lot of things about resilience and about adaptability. And I'm really proud to say that, I have a Danish and a Filipino heritage, and I connect with them very much. Um, and then after it took a while, so I think I was doing my school here for 6 years, and my parents realized that it's very hard to continue to homeschool a teenager. So they decided that it was time to go back to Denmark and reconnect with the Danish side of the family. So we moved back at the age of 13, I think I was, and I slotted right back into the school system there. And there was again a lot of adaptability needed to happen, because I felt I was Filipino and I was taken out of my comfort zone. Um, the Filipino values are very much around community and family. And, you know, the Western culture, the American, Australian, European culture is very much about individuality. And that was something that I hadn't really, it wasn't really super important in the Philippines to be an individual and having your own opinion. So I struggled with that. I struggled to find my voice. But I had the resilience, I had the resilience that I'd picked up from living in the Philippines, and that experience really, it gave me a deep sense of appreciation for multiculturalism. I was really proud of the languages that I had. I was really proud of my Filipino heritage, and I think the one thing I took away from my childhood was that I had seen what poverty was like in the Philippines, and I had also seen what it was like for people to have plenty. So I'd seen, I'd only have to walk outside my backyard in the Philippines and be able to see the difference between me and someone, coming from a different family who don't have enough resources for their kids to go to school, or even just enough resources to provide for the basic needs. And then to be taken out of that society and then going into a Western, into a Western culture, and then seeing that there are people who have plenty and there are people who don't, and we're not created equally. Where people need help, and we need to help each other so that we can disperse the resources more equally. And I understood that from a really, really young age. Like, I would see, being in the classroom in my, provincial school here in the Philippines, you would see that there are the children that are more disruptive, or that have lower grades, or that are always being caught doing naughty things. They were consistently also the children who were coming from lower socioeconomic families. Like, I understood this as a child very early on. I didn't understand so much what the differences were. I just knew that I had more and they didn't have. And that's why they were acting up in the classrooms. So this kind of value I took on into my adulthood. So true to my family heritage, I ended up going to Australia when I was 19, and I finished my university degree there. I did psychology, and then I finished a counseling degree, and I went into the world of youth work. So my first job was working with a nonprofit working with youth at risk, so young people with mental health issues, young people coming from, intergenerational trauma, intergenerational unemployment, young people who were, homeless. Um, and I see now that my background from childhood up until that point, it's been leading me to that point too, because I understood the suffering of young people, and growing up without the resources that they needed to flourish, as young people, because I'd seen that, not so much for myself, but I'd seen it in my environment from a very early age. And then from there, going on with my career as a social worker, I started to experience a lot of difficulties. I realized that I didn't have the inner resilience to cope with maybe a lot of the work pressure that I was experiencing. You're working with highly vulnerable young people, and you're needing to set really clear boundaries. You're needing to be able to have the skills to ask for help. And a lot of the times when you're young, you just see that everybody else knows what they're doing, and you don't want to ask for help, right? So I was sort of doing this job. Maybe the first couple of years in social work, I was going, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm just going to keep going because everybody else seems to know what they're doing. And I got to a point where I was just so stressed out every single day. Like I was, dealing with anxiety every day. And I realized that I needed to figure out how to develop this inner resilience. Like if I want to do this work for the next 2 decades, how am I going to make sure that I'm still going to be there? Because the number, the percentage of burnout in social work and in the helping profession is huge. So that's when I started going out and trying to find practices that would support me building that. I mean, I'd done psychology at school, so I knew I had to start there. And then I discovered, yoga psychology. I discovered mindfulness and meditation, and that they were really effective practices. It's a process when you start to heal yourself, or you start to bring in these practices. It's not just going to be stress be gone or anxiety be gone, but it's a process of doing the practice every single day, or it's a dedication to going to yoga 2 or 3 times a week, um, and being of service to yourself in that way. It's a process of wanting to sit down and write about your difficult experiences. So I spent nearly 10 years in the social work industry, and it was all about that. It was about, dealing with the work and being as supportive as possible to my clients as well as to my social work colleagues, and then privately doing the inner work, going to yoga class, doing meditation, reading about it. My very first meditation book was Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, which was the first time I was introduced to mindfulness, actually. And I really recommend that as a first book, if you are curious about what mindfulness is about and how it can help you. The Power of Now is super super helpful and insightful. From there, I actually discovered my real passion, and that was to help others cope with the difficulties that they're facing in life. So I was experiencing a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. I'm super grateful that I didn't burn out, and I really think that that's because I had these practices in place. Um, but after that, I thought there's something really powerful here. Like it's something that our society don't teach us to do. There is no curriculum when you go to school in how to develop healthy relationships, how to communicate effectively, how to problem solve. how to self-regulate. There's nothing, how to look after yourself in a holistic way through exercise and diet and mentally and emotionally. We don't learn these skills. So I thought it was really important to go out and share these skills with to start with. It was actually my colleagues in social work. I started doing mindfulness sessions with my colleagues to start with, and I ran a camp for young people. The theme was mindfulness, but I wanted more. I wanted to go bigger and to help more people. So I actually came full circle. I It was also a time in my life where I really wanted to go back to. I was in Australia at this time, so I really wanted to go back to the Philippines and reconnect with my roots. Interestingly enough, very same age as my mother was when she brought me back as a baby. I came back to my family home with my partner, and I started re educating myself. So I became a mindfulness and meditation teacher. I tried to teach meditation, pure meditation, in my community when I first came here, and it wasn't very known at all. So I was asked to teach yoga instead, which I did. So I started teaching yoga. I'd done yoga for maybe 10 years. I'd never taught it, but I knew what it felt like in my body. I knew the benefits that it had given me. And I knew that with my counseling and my social work background, I knew that I could guide people to to explore themselves in the same way I had through my yoga practice. So I started very small, just teaching a couple of people, and then I ended up actually partnering with a dance studio in the city. So we set up the first little yoga school in our province, and it was a very gradual spread of the word. People knew that there was a crazy person out there teaching yoga, something called yoga, and I would get all these messages from people going, "Hey, can I join?" Or I've heard about this. My daughter is in Manila and she's doing yoga, and can I join? So it's sort of very, very, very slowly built from there. Um, so since I arrived here, I've been here for 3.5 years. I've done lots of things in wellness with the community. I get requests from organizations that want to, they want to have, they want to teach their staff about well-being, or their, their staff are stressed, especially during this pandemic. So they want to know about wellness. And Gloria, coming from the Philippines, you might know this, that this holistic well-being is a fairly new industry. So before, it's always been very, deal with the illness when it gets here, as opposed to being preventative. And it's amazing, like the medical system has obviously evolved a lot since when I was here.
Or
Um,
since even when I was there, much
yeah,
younger
yeah,
than
that's
you.
right. From the 80s, right?
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
our medical system is so, yeah, it's very well developed, but there's still very little support around um, the more holistic, so mental and emotional health, and how that impacts our long-term physical well-being is something that's fairly unknown here at this moment. But during the pandemic, actually, people have started talking a lot about stress. They're feeling it. They're sitting at home and potentially not able to ignore it as much as when we could move around, and we could distract ourselves a lot more. So I've in the last year, I started working with with women actually around mental health. And that's been a super interesting journey for me, actually, working with Filipino women who are running businesses, who are the breadwinners of their family, but at the same time, they are still, needing to support their families, and maybe doing that in the same way that they want to do that in the same way that they were doing before they started working, which is to give everything. It's to, they need to be doing everything themselves. They're raising the kids, they're cleaning, they're cooking, and also running businesses and being the breadwinners. So it's a really interesting space to be in, um, and seeing how we need to develop, actually, if Filipino women want to be in this space, and I'm, obviously not just talking about Filipino women, but because we're so used to giving everything and saying yes to everything, we're also just burning ourselves out. And again, that's not just about Filipino women, but we're seeing, people burning out all over the country, all over the globe. Um, And it's really interesting to be teaching this as I am also experiencing and having to overcome some of these barriers. So, one of the things I discovered when I started coaching, women in my community, was that we're not very good at boundaries. For example, we're not very good at saying no. And that, it sort of reflected back at me. And I realized with all my meditation and my practices, I was not very good at boundaries. Um, so having to learn to overcome these, or use the experience as a way to transcend, or uh, to break through the upper limit, the things that are stopping us, I also have to learn these things, as well as try to teach them to others, or as well as guide other people to work through this stuff. So this is the very interesting space that I am in now, and it's really inspiring to be working with, my fellow Filipino, business owners, entrepreneurs, women leaders, and as I develop, I'm helping them develop. Um, so that's where you find me at this point in time. And who knows what's going to happen from here. As you've seen, my story has evolved from starting in one country and then ending up in the same space. Um, but yeah, so that's a little snapshot of what's going on for me.
Well, I love that story, Frida. It's a very inspiring story.
Thank you.
I
Mhm.
loved it too, and I like how I've done a lot of extensive study on psychology. I'm going back to school, so I get a master's in psychology. But you hit on a lot of factors that you didn't know then, but know now. Identity, social identity, your
Mhm.
your powerful identity, your identity with culture, ethnicity, religion, all these identities, and sometimes when you're faced with, let's say, so many different identities, it's hard to figure out which one resonates with you the best or which one I need to fit in. So you
Mhm.
are ping ponging back and forth between, okay, I don't fit in with this group. I don't fit in this group. I may have more money than they do, so they don't like me. So I wish I was poor because I would fit in more. We don't understand these, and listen to your evolution of how you got to learn this and how it evolved you into who you are today. That's so wonderful. These skills, I think, are life skills. And when you think about school, I don't know about in the Philippines, but in America,
Mhm.
it's all about doing. So you go to school, so you get education, so you get a good job. That's pretty much the
Yeah.
basic fundamentals. But then, when I work with clients that are high performance at fixing burnout, most of them are really well educated, work at good jobs, but they still feel unfulfilled because they're not taught these life skills. See, they identify with doing, which is go to school, go to great college, get your master's, get a good tech job or get a good job somewhere, and there you go, you're set, you're finished. Most time, once that's done, it's like I got to the end of the road. So what's next?
Mm.
Yeah. And Frida, I'm going to reflect back to when your parents, and most especially your mom, who had made the decision to bring you back to the Philippines and live there for, you know, many years as you were sort of raised in the Philippines. I think I believe one purpose for that is for you to see how you could be, how fortunate you could be living in another country, whereas living in the Philippines as a child or as a kid. Um, because you touched base on, you've seen poverty and you've seen those who has a lot more. In the
Mm.
Philippines, it's either you're poor or you're what they call rich. There's no one in the middle. There's no middle class.
Yeah.
And with that, you be growing up around that. Look at you. Just look at where you're at now, and how you've grown to become a social worker and just being around people who just helping the youth and now helping others.
Mm. Yeah, I sorry. I
No, no, it's okay.
yeah, I think it makes so much sense. Um there's definitely always been the understanding, having seen that as a young person, as a child, that because I have more, I also have a responsibility to give more, to use the education that I had access to, and actually share that with other people who wouldn't have access to this kind of this kind of teachings. Because yeah, as Ron said, it we are taught just to be doing, doing, doing. You get an education, then you get a good job, and you get the things, right? And
Right.
that's very much the same thing still here, in terms of as evolving from from rising yourself from a place where you're poor, or you're poorer than your neighbor, and then um, getting to a place of affluence. We are still following the Western model of you know and obviously it is important. Education is so important to rise out of poverty, but it is about going to a good school, doing everything, getting the education, then getting into a job, doing, and then getting the things, getting the house, getting the car, getting the big parties, getting all the takeaway food. Um, but then we are still, once we get to that place, there is still a questioning. There will still be, are we capable of facing challenges that come up unexpectedly, like this pandemic? Are we capable of supporting our children emotionally, spiritually, physically? Um, how is our health? How is our long-term health? And are we going to live a full, long life? Do we have healthy practices in place in our life? So there is a lot more to developing ourselves as a human being than just getting the education, doing the job, and then getting the stuff. Mm.
Yeah. And these are the things that are not being taught to us. We're not being taught to be aware of our mental health.
Mm.
Maybe sometimes our physical health, right? Okay, you need to exercise or you need to watch what you eat because you need to stay healthy physically.
Yeah.
But let's talk about our mental health.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that I think a lot of people lacks on, is talking about it and touching on that is what's important.
I agree with that. Frida, I have a question for you.
Mm.
Do you believe that in our society we ask enough questions?
No. No, I certainly don't. No. Because I was, yeah.
I was gonna say, what questions do you think are missing?
Hmm. It Many, many. It depends on. it depends on what areas of life um, that we're talking about. Like as children, I think we haven't, we get shut down to ask the question why very often or very early on in our life. And actually, we were born as innately curious beings, and that's why your 2-year-old toddler does cannot get enough of the of the word why, because we're innately wanting to know about how life works. We are innately wanting to learn new things. We're innately wanting to grow, to run when we haven't even learned to crawl yet. It's inbuilt in us, but unfortunately very early on we've learned to stay quiet, unless you're innately a person who has that skill innately, that they just want, that they have something to share and they just do it. So that's in terms of childhood, but there's a lot of things about our society, the way things work, the way our government works, the way our health system works, why resources are being placed in this area but not in this area that is just completely underfunded and needed, especially coming from a social work background. So there's so many questions. That's that's our system, but do we ask questions of in our relationships, what, as opposed to um, we are simply trying to read people's minds. Why aren't we asking each other more questions about how we're feeling, about what it is that we want, about how we can help? So, yeah, Ron, I think there's a lot of questions that we need to ask. And we need to be teaching future generations to be inquisitive, to go back to our natural nature of being inquisitive about life and how we can do things better, how we can evolve in consciousness, not just in technology. How can we evolve in consciousness? Yeah.
You're certainly right about that. Inside we do two things. We create mind reads and we create complex equivalents, which are two things that
Mm.
we do all the time. So obviously, mind reads that we tend to think what someone else is thinking without asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
We're
A con-
assuming in
Mm-hmm.
that case.
exactly.
Yes,
That's a
making
that's a mind read.
assumption.
Right.
A complex equivalent is we use a parameter of certain things that equal X. Let's give this one. This is probably not the best example, but if someone is Hispanic background and they grew up in Mexico, right? So obviously Hispanic background, they grew up in Mexico. Thus, oh, they must be a farmer. Oh, they can't speak English. There's a
Hmm.
complex equivalence, which is A equals B equals C equals D.
It's a
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
stereotype.
exactly. Well, that's just only in that context. That was easier
Okay.
for me to
Okay.
describe.
Okay.
But we do it all the time. Let's say a person has a nice house, they have a nice car. So nice house, nice car equals, oh, they must have a good job. They must be smart.
Mm-hmm.
When technically we don't know if their car is leased, the home is rented, or if they're dead broke. We just don't know, right? But instead, we assume those are the equivalents. Or let's say another equivalent could be that the more, let's say, social media, the more someone has followers, the more they're validated. So if someone has more followers on their social media, thus whatever they do or say is true.
Mm-hmm.
So we create all these mind reads, complex equivalents. Instead, we're not empowering the collective, which is everybody, to ask more questions. Like, what does success mean to you? What does happiness mean to you? How do you want to live your life? How do you identify yourself? Just those simple questions will lead you in a lot of different directions, but we just don't do enough of that. And that's why I asked the question: are we asking enough questions? Get your
Mm-hmm.
opinion, because you're living in the Philippines, which is different than North America. I've never been in the Philippines. I don't know. I just know based upon my experience is that culturally, mindfulness is not apparent in other cultures. It's just you just do. You know, you deal with it, you suck it up, you deal with it, you suck it up, and that's what causes a big problem. And because we continually do that, we're burning ourselves out internally because all we're doing is suppressing those feelings or suppressing what's happening and just dealing with it. Well, eventually, what happens? You have stress, you have heart attacks, high blood pressure. You can't deal with society. Sometimes you have mental disorders because you just don't know how to deal with these pressures. And you know, I read this book called "Laziness is a Lie,"
Mhm.
and in our society, the idea is that if we work, we get what we need. So if we burn ourselves out, hopefully one day we get what we need. When that doesn't make any sense at all.
Mm,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
If that was too much, if that was too much information, I apologize. But I just
No, but
when
that was powerful, especially
Yeah.
the end.
Yeah,
when I
not at
hear things
all.
like
Yeah.
this, yeah, when I hear things like this, is this it feels so good to see Frida or people like you that we meet on the podcast that are inherently now like, wow, wait a minute, I'm waking up and say, okay, well, let's do things a little bit different. And the more people that start waking up and realize things could be different, it will create a more of a unity in our society versus a difference in labeling. That's what I feel and believe.
Mhm. Yeah, I paused there on because I wanted to reflect a little bit more on it because we don't talk enough about the assumptions that we've made about how we're living. You know, we're just seeing um for example, we're just seeing everybody being on social media and therefore I have to be on social media. Or, you know, if I'm not on social media, I'm missing out. My life is not full as it should be if I'm not doing the same things as other people are doing. And similarly, in terms of our work and our life and the way we've chosen to structure our work and our life, we've just taken on the previous system, which is, I mean, it's called many things. You know, it's called patriarchal or a more masculine way of doing things. And when I talk about masculine and feminine, it doesn't mean male or female. It just means an energy. It's an energy that we have. And in yoga philosophy, we talk about the masculine and the feminine, and the masculine is the sun. It's the day, the active, the going out and getting your goals. It's being able to sustain energy for long periods of time. You know, it's super active and empowering. But at the same time, the feminine is the going inwards, it's reflection, it's connection to our inner nature. It's just being without there necessarily being a goal. You know, it's just connection, it's collaboration. And having those two together are incredibly powerful. You know, so the feminine is the moon, is this is the yin and the yang as well, and you know, in Eastern philosophy. And being able to balance these two energies is incredible because you're able to pull out your energy when you need to get stuff done, when you need to do something you're not very confident with. You're able to push through, and then when it's necessary, you pull back. You reflect on your experience. You collaborate with others because this isn't your strength. You create community. So together, the yin and the yang, the masculine, the feminine, the whatever you want to choose to call it, is super powerful. But what we're choosing to do at the moment is just doing one thing, and that's a very active do way of doing things. And we are not really exploring the other side of ourselves, where as human beings we need to be processing our experiences all the time in order to integrate it into who we are, learn from our experiences, learn from the trauma, you know, that we pick up, and then integrate it holistically into our being so that it doesn't become something that weigh us down. You know, my yoga teacher trainer, Ashley Turner, she keeps talking about that your life is your curriculum. So the things that you experience in your life, that's also where the golden nuggets are. That's also where the learning is meant to be. And that's how we then use that as food to grow, you know, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. But in the system that we have now, it's like it's all doing and fast paced, and we're burning out because we're not allowing the time that is also needed to heal ourselves, to reintegrate our learning into our being, step into a higher form of consciousness, be present to our family members or to our environment, which is an incredibly important part of life. So I really love that these conversations are possible today, that we can try to imagine a different way of being, a different way of working and living.
You know what? I like how you expanded on that and gave us more context
Mm.
in your view. It's really important that the meat of our life is our traumatic experiences.
Mm.
Some are really severe, so I'm not talking severe traumatic experiences,
Mm.
but you hear stories like think about MAD, Mothers Against Drug Driving. How that really got started was a traumatic experience. It's basically the mother that started this organization. Her son, or I think daughter, was killed in a car accident by a drunk driver. She started a foundation called Mothers Against Drunk Driving. I mean,
Mm.
there's several out there. That's the first one that came into mind that it started because of trauma. And usually, when we have time, or it's called cocooning or ruminating over a traumatic experience, is then where we have thing called post traumatic growth, which we grow out of that experience to a different level. But most of us just don't have the resources. And I like how you use the word resources, because it's very valuable that all of us out there have resources to get us through traumatic experiences, or get us the needs we need, get us the education we need, or get us the daily needs to food, water, shelter, right? Medication, healthcare. And that's really prevalent that we start championing those movements, because it's really that's where life really boils down to. It's just really, really grow is those experiences. And when I think about also, and we heard the word resources, as you mentioned earlier, is, you know, a lot of things in our life that we experience is because we maybe at the time didn't have the resources. So most of the time, we never think or ask ourselves a question: what resources that we need to either get or learn that allows us to get out of our situation. Sometimes when we look at certain situations, we just think these are our resources. We can't change that, and it becomes part of our identity, and not just part of our identity, it becomes part of who we are. And it's really, really, to me, is, most people don't think about this concept. Life is really malleable, and the brain has neuroplasticity, so it can always grow, learn, and adapt. And just like a plastic mold, we can always remold ourselves if given the right resources and given the right talent, and know we can. Most of the time, we don't give ourselves permission enough to say, I can.
Well, we don't because, there's always that fear of judgment. And speaking of resources, also, not very many people have or know of any resources that they have. And that's where we come in.
Mm.
And that brings me to my question to Frida is
Mm.
what brought you back to the Philippines? And what was it about, the Philippines or going back to your hometown or your family's hometown that where you wanted to be at, and what do you have planned?
Mm. Thanks for that question, Gloria. Yeah. So what brought me back to the Philippines were a couple of things. Mainly, there was just an urge to come back and reconnect to my roots, like with all the self exploration I'd done, working in the social work industry. I realized that I'd also spent a lot of time um, without family. Like I'd spent a lot of time focusing on my career and helping other people, but I had become completely disconnected to the place where most of my values had actually come from, where the values to help others had actually come from. So there was one thing there I really wanted to reconnect, and I think I also recognized that there was a hesitation to come back. Um, Anyone who has lived in one place as a child and then gone off somewhere and become an adult somewhere else might know the feeling that I I haven't been an adult in this environment, right? Last time these people had a relationship with me, I was 10, for example. How am I going to now develop a relationship with these people as an adult and as who I am now? And I think there was hesitation in doing that. So that alone was food enough for me to go back, because I didn't want to just be stuck on the other side of the world and avoiding. That's the word I was trying to get to. I don't want didn't want to be avoiding if there was a shadow there for me. And then the other thing was my partner and I really wanted to try a different way of life. My partner's into uh, organic farming, is into slow living, and he really wanted to get his hands active on a piece of land that he could develop. And my we had that in the Philippines. So it aligned with both our values. That was the main thing. And then it aligned very perfectly with my desire to change careers as well, that I wanted to go from social work and actually become a meditation teacher. So lots of things just aligned that allowed us to make that move. And you asked what I have planned. So at the moment, I'm working with a few women in business, and I'm actually supporting them in their leadership. Uh, and how they show up for their ventures and their businesses and their employees, doing a lot of things around well-being. So I'm really hoping to expand that and really provide services that nurture Filipina CEOs so they can step into their power. Um, and at the same time, I've developed an 8-week coaching program for women entrepreneurs, and this is more a global project. So it's an 8-week coaching program for women entrepreneurs who are dealing with stress, anxiety, and fear that that burnout is essentially going to stop them from developing their business and from allowing what they want to give into the world. Preventing them from putting that out into the world because of mental or emotional issues. So I'm doing some stuff locally, and then I'm also developing this online coaching business of mine.
Well, you already know this, and I've already told you this, that I love what you're doing. I love your ideas, and I love the fact that you are bringing this back to a place or a country that is not known, or that mindfulness or just anything that has to do with any mental health is not known in that country.
Mhm.
And you bringing that there and implementing it is, I think it's wonderful. And I love that you're doing that. I think that it is really, you're going to make a huge difference in the people in that country, in the Philippines, and most especially we talked about women, especially women. We all know what women are viewed as in the Philippines, right? And I think just making that huge difference with the women and of course the youth, and there's a
Mhm.
lot of them out there that is not fortunate enough to have this kind of resource around them, or that this is being brought into their attention at all. Maybe they're not just aware of it. So I love it.
Mhm.
Love it. And
Thank
congratulations and
you.
thank you for that.
I have
Thank
a
you so
question,
much,
Frida.
Laura. Yeah, sure.
Is in the Philippines, in your context, are women more susceptible to other practices of mindfulness, meditation than men? I mean, is there separation there? I'm curious.
Um, I would say that most of the clients I've had through my yoga practice, through my mindfulness, the stress management I've done, it's been mainly women, unless it's been corporate. So of course, if I was also doing some corporate stress management, so of course then there's a mix of both men and women. But the people that gravitate towards what I'm doing in the community at the moment, it's definitely majority women. Um, yeah.
Do my other question then
Mm.
is how can I put this question? It's
Spit it
mostly
out.
women. I know it's mostly women, but
Mhm.
I'm curious. It's like are men okay with it too? Or are they like, oh, that's different? I'm a man. I should just deal with my problems. I don't need this. Women. I mean, what's the idea behind this? I mean, that's I'm curious about.
Mm. I mean, I have to say I haven't asked any Filipino men. Not even my family members. Um, but maybe even just from my own personal perspective, there is potentially a less likelihood that men are gonna admit that this is something they need. I've certainly have men approach me about yoga from a perspective of fitness or curiosity, but I would say that there. I guess from my personal experience, there is a sense that it is harder for men to maybe see for themselves that they could need the help, or maybe they don't even realize that it's something that they need. As women, I think we're innately wired towards collaboration. We're innately wired towards getting support. Even as we sometimes feel like I don't want to ask for support, but I think there is an innate ability to rally people around us. So maybe it's a more natural approach for a woman to go, oh, I've heard that this is good for me. I'm going to try it. Um, does that make sense?
It does make sense. I was asking because you know, in the coaching programs I've been in and things I've experienced is it's more women than men. So I'm kind of
Mm,
curious. Is it America or is it around the
mm,
world? And innately, as I was growing up, my dad would always tell me feelings are for women. And I'm
mm,
a man. I'm a teacher to be a man, not a woman. So you need to work and
mm.
provide for your family.
Yeah.
And that at that era had a lot of just survival mentality. Let me use the word better. Lack of abundance and more of a scarcity mentality.
Mm,
And usually, what people don't understand is that when you neglect an emotional part of yourself, you're actually losing a part of yourself.
mm,
Because when traumatic experiences hit you and the emotions come up, right, with human beings having a human experience, you don't deal with them. So what
mhm,
happens when my dad had emotional problems that would come up, his default was to work. Emotional
mm,
problems come up, default was to work. And started what's happening over the years, he would have strokes, he would have heart attack, high blood pressure, poor diet, lack of energy, just all these other things because had all these emotions he suppressed and kept it so much down that now what's experienced, what you experience, what's held in your body, your mind. So what's held in your mind will experience through the body. So having poor health and all that was the fact he kept all this down. And
mm,
that's why I asked that question. I was just really,
mm.
really curious about it.
Yeah.
You know, I would think that I think from the way from what I think is that just me personally that it could be both that they're just not aware of it or they're just they don't want to or they're just in denial about it. Maybe they don't want to come forward about it, I think it's more like sometimes also that the way they grew up or in either in their culture or the family around them, the environment that they grew up in is they're just not open minded about it.
Mm,
Mm. That's totally true. That's why I asked the question. I was curious.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
and I
think
think
you're.
yeah.
Oh, sorry, Gloria.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I think Ron, you're bringing up such an important point here because, I mean, I'm working with women and I'm mainly gravitating towards that because I have the experience that I can share with other women, but I think um, having support from men and what it's going to mean to be a man in the next century and in this new world that's coming up is going to be so important because men have the right to have the resources to explore their own emotion, their own emotional world, their own mental world without it being labeled as one thing or another. Like we all have you know the 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 birthright, I think, to be able to explore who we are and have the resources to do so. So I mean, I did a lot of traveling in Latin America and came across a lot of organizations who were talking to me about the violence in their male population, the drinking and the violence that happens. And this is not necessarily because of because of men. It's the lack of support. It's the lack of the psychological education worldwide around how to support, both men and women and everybody else. So I think it's something that's going to be really interesting to see how the services that might come out to support all genders, that we have. Yeah, but in particularly what you brought up, Ron, around um, potentially men traditionally being taught to suppress emotions and just work. This will be an interesting space to.
I would love that. I
Sorry,
would
this
love
that's the water coming. Yeah, it's amazing here. Like I can brief every single family member, but then something will always happen, like fisherwoman yelling outside my window, selling fish, Uh, I can't control the
That's
environment.
okay.
Yeah, anyway.
Sometimes I miss that kind of that lifestyle. I mean, growing up there, it's just and then I do still watch I have the Filipino channel and I still watch it sometimes and I see that and I'm like, God, I miss that sometimes. It's different here, we don't get that here. Here it's just sometimes the neighborhood is just quiet. But, sometimes you want peace and quiet also, but at the same time you want to see that because it's just interesting and
Yeah.
it's just fun.
Yeah.
And, I wanted to
Yeah.
just go back to what you guys were saying about men, and I think that that would be yes, it would be interesting to see, and I think I'd be one of those people to say that I would love to have and see that with men who can just be open and be vulnerable, and just not suppressing anything. My mom's side of the family in the Philippines, has there's a lot of men on that side, and I know, and from what I've heard, some have, you talk about drinking, and that's what they use to take out their emotions or whatever it is. They start drinking and they become alcoholic, right? And some who's become violent because that's how they take it out again. But
Mm.
that's the kind of environment that they've seen around,
Yeah.
um, because they're not given the chance to speak up or say how they feel because men are viewed as no, you're going to be a man, you're
Mhm.
going to be working for your family, this is what you're going to do, you're going to take care of your family, your kids, whatever, you need to work. Just but it's different with everybody. But that
Yeah.
would be I would love to see something like that, and not just in the Philippines, I would say, gosh, globally, the whole world, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We need a oh gosh, a men's rights revolution.
For
Yeah.
real, seriously, I would like to
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah, seriously. And I just to pick up a point you mentioned there, Gloria, that we're only just role modeling what we're seeing in our environment. So until we have the resources to see other role models, different types of role models, then it will continue itself, you know. Um, so yeah, these conversations are super important, I think.
It is. And would like to thank you for sharing your story with us and to our audience. I love your story and I love what you're doing. And, I'm a fan. And I've already told you that from the beginning when we first talked. And again, I just wanted to um, congratulate you now with, whatever it is that you have planned and the success that you have going on there in the Philippines. I think this is really wonderful and making a difference with everybody. And I hope for you to continue and good for your continued success as well. On that note, how can people find you? Where can they can find you? And is there anything that you have coming up?
Yes, so as I mentioned before, I do have my 8 week mindfulness and stress management program for female entrepreneurs that's coming up at the end of this month. But people can find me on fridasorensen.com. That's my website. So Sorensen is spelled SOERENSEN.com. And then you can also find me at Frida Sorensen on Facebook and IG that's Instagram at Wellness with Frida. So if anyone, just feel free to, you want to have a chat about mental health, on stress management, um, don't hesitate to get in touch with me.
That's amazing. And look for all people out there looking for wellness, meditation, yoga. This is awesome. Best person you can contact to get the needs you need immediately and get the help you need immediately. Sometimes, for those out there that do not want to take medication, they want a holistic approach to feeling better or at least find an outlet. For it is a person that will be able to help you get that. Because most of us, like myself, I don't believe in a lot of medication. I believe in a holistic approach. Let me see if I can try some different ways that can support myself long term. Because I don't believe in taking a lot of medication if I can, if I don't need to. I'd rather work on something myself and give me the opportunity to create my life. Because when I look at medication, I always think about once they give you a new pill, it may affect something else. They give you another pill that affects something else. For you're taking 10 to 15 different medications and it's destroying your body. So let's start healing ourselves inside out. And with that being said, Frida, thank you for being a guest on Life's the Shuffles podcast. I really am humbled by your story. I'm humbled by your experience. And I love listening to people's stories. It's like, for me, it's like hearing a documentary from a live person versus watching on TV or Netflix. And thank you for being authentic and obviously exposing not just the Filipino culture, but the world about how mental health and meditation can be helpful for them. And for those out there that want to be a guest and share their story, you can go to www.lifesashuffle.com. Subscribe also on our Instagram, but go to Life and Shuffle, send us an email, and be on guest and share your story. Because you know what? If we collectively heal the world, we can help each other out. Thanks again, Frida.
Thank you so much, Ron and Gloria, for having me. It's been such a pleasure.
Yes, thank you. Thanks again for joining us today and sharing your story. And again, to our listeners, thank you for your support and listening. And again, this is Gloria, your mindfulness coach, and thank you for listening to another episode of Life's a Shuffle.